Welcome to the Regular People Podcast. I'm Wade Allen, and today I'm joined by Aaron Taylor. Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Wade.
So it sounds like we're going to be mostly talking, or, we'll see where it goes, but we'll be mostly talking about good and evil.
Yeah.
That sounds like an interesting topic to me.
Yeah, I think so. That's why I chose it.
Do you want to give listeners any background on who you are and what you've been up to throughout your life? You don't have to, I guess, but I think it helps from a listener's perspective to know who you are, where you're coming from.
Definitely. Well, I'm 30 years old.
Older than me. Not that much older, though.
Well, what do you want to know about? What do you think?
What have you been up to in your last 5 years of your life? I think is a good. I don't need to know about your entire life history, but if you find talking about what jobs you've worked is helpful, or how you've changed in your mind about maybe how you stand on certain topics, if you've been thinking about a lot of things lately.
Okay.
What you've been interested in the past few years, that kind of thing.
Well, 5 years ago, I was in my last year of my undergraduate degree.
What did you go for?
I was a cell and molecular biology major.
Sounds cool.
It was very cool. I was a pre-medical student. A lot of pre-medical students choose biochemistry or cell and molecular biology. But by that time where I was almost done with my degree, I had already started realizing that I didn't want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
That
was the original intent, though?
Yes. Well, originally when I started going to college, I was at MATC, and I knew I wanted to do something science-based because I felt like it was hard for a lot of people, but I felt like I could do it. And I was like, well, how could I want to serve people.
Yeah.
So I want to fill a role that maybe other people can't fill. And
By the way, MATC is Milwaukee Area Technical College.
Right. Yeah. So I was going there, and my plan was to get some credits out of the way for cheap at MATC, and then transfer to UWM into their medical technologist program.
Cool.
So like a lab technician in a hospital or a clinic.
Yeah.
But after transferring to UWM, I had shadowed some lab technicians, and I decided that I was capable of more. I liked the work, but I was like, I want to do more. So then I decided to aim for doctor. It was like the first week of school, and I changed some of my courses to get on track for that. But by the time I had graduated, I had 3.8 GPA. I had 2 years of research assistant experience.
Nice.
I was preparing for the MCAT, which is the medical college application test, but I just decided I never applied to any medical schools, even though I might have gotten in.
Yeah.
Because I just saw way too many problems with our medical industry. The for-profit.
Yeah.
It's all pharmaceuticals and surgeries, and I envisioned medicine more as an educational role.
Did you never maybe imagine getting all the certifications and then maybe working in Europe or something like that? Or in maybe a different context that isn't all about the
I was looking at schools in
healthcare.
I had a list of 20 medical schools I was looking at, and one of them was in England and 2 of them were in Canada. Yeah. So, and one of them was in the Caribbean. I don't know. No, I just sort of bailed on it. I didn't like the other pre-med students that I was studying alongside. They just seemed really full of themselves.
So is there something about the culture of it that you disliked?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that can make you uncomfortable to be a part of it.
Yeah.
When you're in that. Okay.
So anyways, that was, and then I did graduate in 2016. I got my degree, and I decided instead I wanted to be a science teacher. So there was a fast track program. You just cram a bunch of credits in. You go summer, fall, and spring. And I did that, and I got my teaching license in, I had teaching license in chemistry, biology, middle school science, and physical science. My last semester of getting my teaching license, I worked under an emergency license. So Wisconsin has a teacher shortage problem, And so people who are working on getting their license can start teaching.
Hmm.
So I worked at a school for at-risk kids for 1 semester while going to school, and it was super stressful.
Yeah.
And emotionally draining.
The combination of the two, or like would it still be stressful with just one of those? Just the teaching.
I mean, just the teaching alone was very stressful. Like it was only 100 kids in the school about, and every single one of them had like tragic life stories, and it was very difficult to deal with. I felt like I was getting like secondhand trauma like every day from just the kids like telling me what's going on in their lives, and like just like knowing. And, you know, I went to Milwaukee Public Schools my whole life. I always like went to school alongside like poor kids, and like so I thought I kind of like knew like the hardships that like lower class families in Milwaukee are facing, but like as an adult and really just like hearing the stories of some of the kids who have been through the worst, it was just
they would actually tell you that? They weren't like
it was
shy about it?
It was surprising how open they were with telling their problems.
Huh. They must have trusted you as a teacher at least.
Somewhat. Or that's just how desperate they were to be heard.
Yeah, perhaps.
And I think maybe the school situation or like the school setting was a place that they felt safe.
Yeah, at least more comfortable than in their homes.
Yeah. So there was that. That was so hard that the next year I decided I needed to take a break. I had pushed myself so hard in college, then I kept pushing myself after graduation. And so I did a year as a teacher's assistant in a middle school. That was also very difficult. The classrooms have like 40 kids in them.
Yeah.
They're not their house training or their like discipline is just it's a mess. It was a mess. But halfway through the year I got transferred into a room for special education students. So I only had it was 2 adults in one room with 8 kids.
Yeah.
And I got to do some really awesome science lessons with them. The special education teacher in the room just let me teach the science hour because I was a licensed science teacher. Yeah. So they're like, okay, yeah, go ahead. And I did a lot of fun stuff, and the kids would go to talk to other kids and then about what we're doing in the classroom. And then all of a sudden we'd have kids knocking on the door I want to learn science from Mr. Taylor. and they're like, well, sorry. Yeah. You have a regular science class that you have to go to. So that felt really good.
That's cool.
And then I became an actual science teacher again at Riverside High School, which I graduated from 10 years ago. So that was pretty interesting to teach alongside my teachers.
Yeah. You're still there, the teachers that you had?
Yes. Some of the teachers that I had were still there, and they were my coworkers now.
What did they think of you being there? That must have been really cool for them too.
Yeah. There's actually a few alumni at Riverside, students that I had gone to school with that were teaching there as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it was a pretty... it's a well-loved school in Milwaukee, so it was cool. A lot of the teachers liked that alumni were working alongside them. Yeah. So, yeah. And I did that for a year, and I figured...
So is this now a total of 2 years of teaching?
2.5.
2.5.
Yeah. With the student teaching.
Right.
The student teaching and the teacher's assistant included. So my total time in education was 2.5 years. But Riverside's the second or third best high school in Milwaukee public school system, and it was not a good situation. I had 5 sections. It's 180 students, and it was so much classroom management. I didn't want to do it anymore. And my brother had been a carpenter for 3 years in the carpenters union, and we were living together in this house, and we would come home and swap work stories. And I started really liking, I was like, man, his job sounds cool. I would love to work with my hands. So I pursued it. I got a job at the company he was working at. I worked so I finished teaching in June, and a week later I had quit my teaching job, and I was set up to go become a carpenter. And I've been a carpenter for 2 years now. So
how do you find that?
It's my favorite job I've ever had.
Really?
I love it.
Wow.
I love it.
That's good to hear. I had a job for a summer that I was working with my hands, and I was outside all the time. And it's one of those jobs. Wake up at 4 a.m. and you're done with work at like 1 p.m. or something.
Yeah.
I really liked aspects of it, but I don't think I'd say it's my favorite job I've ever had. I don't know. I kind of hated the actual when it got to like the manual labor of it. Like sometimes I'd have to like dig holes in the ground in like the middle of April, and it's like the ground is frozen still, and that's pretty awful.
Yeah, working outside sucks when it's like freezing out.
Yeah, but I got really tan, and I definitely was like getting a workout every single day, so that was cool.
Yeah, I think I put on some muscle weight in the past 2 years of doing this.
And I did work with really cool people. Do you like a lot of your coworkers?
My coworkers, that's a mixed bag.
Is your job, do you like work with them, or is it more like you're kind of doing your own thing?
Usually like we work in pairs, sometimes working alone. But it's a lot of working in pairs.
Yeah, same. That's how it was for me too.
Yeah, especially as like an apprentice, they usually have you with a journeyman so that you're learning.
Yeah.
But and there's like a lot of tasks that just are better with two people.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess for safety purposes too, you probably should work with someone else.
Yeah, and then there's like the other tradesmen around. So like there's like, electricians and plumbers and so like there's people nearby typically.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like you're alone.
So you're an apprentice right now?
Yeah, I'm a second year apprentice.
How long does it take to become a journeyman?
So it's based on the hours that you work. If you work 40 hours a week all year without getting laid off at all, it takes like 4 or 5 years. There's also like classes that you have to finish. So
okay. Do you pay for those, or does your
No.
job?
Actually, we get paid to go to class.
Oh, that's cool.
Not much. It's like $250 for a week of class.
Oh, okay.
So it's enough to just like help out.
Yeah.
To make up for the fact that you're not getting paid at your job when you're in class.
Yeah. Have you taken any of those classes yet?
Yeah.
Is that something you do kind of continuously?
It's 1 week every 3 months.
Oh, okay.
They're okay.
Yeah. My job wasn't like a construction job. It paid fine-ish. Didn't pay all that well, and it wasn't like a union job or anything like that. It was just working for the government for the parks department. So it was like a seasonal job, and it was a mix between like college-age kids and like retired guys. So
that's a cool mix.
Yeah. It was still, it was mostly a fun job though. So you're satisfied with your current job? You think you'll be doing that for the foreseeable future?
I don't know. Yeah, for the foreseeable future. Right. Yeah.
Cool. You think you'll make it to the journeyman stage?
Yeah, I might make it to the journeyman stage and then do something different with my life. Cool. I'm just kind of one of those people that doesn't want to do the same thing forever.
I feel that as well. Yeah. I change jobs probably more frequently than a college or a resume helper would recommend me to.
Yeah, but that's like more common now though.
Yeah, probably.
And
yeah, I guess I hear that like millennials are expected to change careers at least like 3 times throughout the course of their life. I don't think I've ever had what you would call a career, but I mean I've definitely changed my jobs more than 3 times.
Yeah, I mean I could see doing 3 or 4 in my life. Yeah. So I'm already on my second one. So.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to say, aside from talking about school and work, 2016, when Bernie Sanders was running for president, I've always been involved in like politics, at least like in my mind. I mean, I remember canvassing for issues when I was in middle school. I've always been interested in politics, but during the Obama years, I guess I kind of became complacent. And in 2016, like, Bernie Sanders like ignited that fire inside of me, and I knocked on a lot of doors for him, and I did so again here in 2020. And so these past 5 years, I've been getting involved with local political groups like Milwaukee Democratic Socialists for America, DSA, and the Bernie Sanders organization called Our Revolution. So cool. That's what else I've been doing.
Yeah, I've never been that politically active. Like, I've cared about politics and stuff, but I've never knocked on doors and gone canvassing.
Oh, it's great. You should come do it with me sometime.
Yeah, it sounds fun.
It's really great. And I can teach you a way to do it that is better than the way that some people do it. Okay. And some organizations are very like focused on like candidate or party.
Yeah.
When DSA goes canvassing, we do something called deep canvassing where we really try and talk about issues. We don't want it to just be like surface level, hey, vote for this person, or this party is good, ideas. This party is bad. It's like, let's talk about the actual ideas.
That's cool.
And like, let's actually listen to the person at the door and hear what they have to think before we even open our mouth and say anything.
Yeah.
Which is it. I've had so many good conversations. So many.
Yeah. One series of videos that I've been wanting to make for a long while now, but haven't yet, is like just going around to random strangers and asking them, having like political conversations with them. You know, kind of like, I guess it'd be like canvassing, except it wouldn't be trying to promote any particular candidate, more just like gathering data and how.
More like surveying than
yes,
canvassing?
surveying. That's the right word. Yeah.
I had a similar idea, actually.
Like, how so?
Well, I was wanted to make some episodes for River West Radio.
Yeah.
So I've done some work at River West Radio with my friend Marty. He's got a show called Youth Rising Up.
Yeah, you had me on Youth Rising Up.
Yeah, so
back in the spring.
I wanted to do something over there, like a few episodes of a show where I would go, like, pick a question and go out and just like ask random people, like outside of stores or like on street corners.
Yeah.
And just like get their responses and have it be open-ended, not like multiple choice.
Right.
But then try and categorize the responses, like the general idea behind the responses, and like then present the data.
Yeah.
And also like I would record the conversations and like take example snippets of like what people are saying. Yeah, and then just be like, hey, this is what people in Milwaukee actually think.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Not like whatever MSNBC, Fox News is like telling me my neighbors think, but like, hey, here's what they actually think.
Yeah. And I feel like especially during, campaign seasons, it seems like everybody kind of, their ideas get boiled down to just simple things. Like you drive across a neighborhood and you see a bunch of Trump signs or a bunch of Biden signs. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the people have more nuanced and sophisticated ideas than just like Trump good, Biden good, or whatever.
They do.
I'm sure really a lot of the Trump signs don't really even support Trump. They're just Republicans, so they put up the Republican image, or same thing for Democrats, where it's more about the ideas and, just got to put up the sign to show your support, even though it's not like you're a Biden fanboy.
Right.
You might prefer Bernie Sanders, but you put up the Biden sign.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see how people actually feel rather than just, what they voted for.
I've found that people in general, at least the people that are willing to talk when you knock on the door, are much more reasonable than you might think.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're working with what I think is false information, and that leads them to conclusions that I don't think are good conclusions. But like when you recognize that they're working with false information, then you're like, oh, well, it kind of makes sense that these are the conclusions you came to. Or they're just like ignorant of a lot of information. And teaching people, it doesn't happen in a moment. It takes time. And people want to think like you could just walk up to somebody and be like, hey, here's the facts. And that like they're going to absorb it immediately and change their mind. Yeah. And it's like, that's not how education works.
Yeah. It's, I don't remember. It's something like Galileo. There's some quote that's like, you can't actually teach other people. You can only like show them how to teach themselves or something like that. That's not the quote at all, but it's something similar to that, where it's like people aren't going to just ingest whatever facts you give them. They have to accept it in their own minds. And then when they do accept it, they feel like it came from them rather than from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's also the whole thing of like, before you can put the information into their mind, there has to be some work done to like remove the false preconceptions.
Right. Yeah.
And without removing the false preconceptions first, you can't like put the truth in there.
Yeah.
But they have to be curious, is what you're saying, sort of, right?
Yeah.
They have to like want to learn.
Right.
It's
hard to get people to do if they're not already there.
Right. Definitely. Definitely.
So one thing I thought of when you said the word ignorance, and I think maybe this will now bring us to our good and evil topic.
Yeah.
Is there's this Eastern idea that ignorance is the root of evil. Like
this just came up the other night, actually.
Oh, really?
At this table with some friends, I claim that ignorance is evil.
Oh, wait, so you agree with that?
I do. I mean, I think I do. I mean, we could explore it some more. But...
Right. So, in your mind, would you frame it as ignorance is like the root of evil, or ignorance is just a evil?
Well,
because I think maybe the more Eastern or like Hinduist or Buddhist idea is
I think we got to rewind.
Oh, sure, we can do that. Yeah.
Well, but go ahead. Okay, so explain it.
It's that like all evils would be rooted in ignorance.
I haven't thought about it before, but my like instinct gut response to that is, yes, that sounds right.
Yeah, like everything that you could do that is harming the world or harming other
Well-
people is rooted in a misunderstanding or a lack of imagination
I mean,
or something like
I
that.
feel like a lot of people think that like evil is carried out by like in their mind. They hear the word evil and they're like, yeah, bad guys who like want to do
right,
evil.
intentional.
But most evil in the world, I don't think is based in bad intentions.
Yeah.
Like
I
there's
think I
not
would
too
agree
many
with
people who like I'm the bad guy.
Right.
You know?
This super like hero movie kind of villain.
Right. I mean, there
idea.
are definitely some demented people in the world who are
Yeah.
like that. And we can get into that too, but for the most part, I think most of the pain and suffering is caused by ignorance, misunderstandings of
Or like good intentions even.
or you have good intentions but they create bad outcomes.
Right. Okay, so we can rewind. I just jumped right into the
Yeah,
good and evil thing with the ignorance, but so where would you like to start the discussion of good and evil?
Well, I think I really like semantics. Like I think defining terms is super
it's
important.
yes.
Like
You can have conversations with people that go for 2 hours and then you realize at the end you were talking about different things.
yeah, it's actually something you've talked about in your podcast before with I can't remember which guest, but I was just like, oh yes, exactly. Like so important that a lot of people. So like anyways, what is evil?
To me, I completely reject the idea of natural evils, such as natural disasters. For instance, okay, in the problem of evil that is used as a criticism against religion and against God specifically is that, why does evil exist in this world if God could stop it from happening? And then you've got all sorts of arguments for that, like, well, God wants us to have free will. However, it does not account for natural disasters.
Mm-hmm.
So like people who are trying to argue against religion, and normally I'm one of those people, would say that like, God is causing or just letting these natural disasters happen that result in lots of people dying.
Mm-hmm.
So they use the word evil to describe these things.
Mm.
I don't think that's a good characterization of what evil is. I don't think bad events are necessarily evil, because when I think of the word evil, I would think there is an agent involved. Whether they're intentionally doing something or unintentionally doing something, it is still a something, like a someone that is
Nature's
causing
not
something.
an agent?
I don't think nature is an agent, no. Like nature is just nature, It's not like the hurricane had any intentions, whether good or bad. It just did something.
But then it goes back to, so does there have to be, there has to be intentions involved?
I think there has to be intentions. The intentions don't have to be evil themselves. I just think okay, maybe this is a simpler way to put it. I think there's a difference between bad and between evil.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, my mind was
For instance, if I am walking down the street and I step on a nail and it goes right through my foot, there's no evil there, but it is bad. Yeah. So that's the kind of way I would think of a natural disaster. I just wouldn't put natural disasters in the category of evil things, but I would put human-caused disasters in evil, such as
Okay.
school shootings or whatever. That's evil.
So what makes something evil then?
Something that's evil is there is a harm done,
Mm-hmm.
and then there is also a intentional action that caused that harm.
Yeah.
And I'm not to say that the intent was to cause harm, but the action wasn't accidental.
Right.
I don't think it's evil to hit someone with your car on accident.
Right, but at the same time, isn't there probably things you could have done better?
Yeah. And I think like mistakes, that's what I like.
So like somebody gets in their car drunk.
Right.
Is that evil?
I think the decision to get in their car drunk, yeah, you could probably use the word evil for that.
Right, they weren't intending to hurt anybody.
Sure.
But they ignored the possible outcomes of their behavior.
Yes. Yeah. So which would be an evil from ignorance. However, getting in your car, not drunk, accidentally hitting someone, I don't know what evil there was. Unless maybe somewhere along the way you decide to run a red light and then you hit someone. Deciding to run the red light, perhaps you could put that under the category of evil. There was a decision involved.
Right, it's like carelessness.
Yeah, carelessness is a good way. You can be carelessly evil, I suppose.
Yeah. I think.
What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I dig everything you're saying. Actions that
with the chords there.
Sorry, actions that create, bad outcomes, and on like the most simple level, I would say that like pain and suffering.
Right. Yeah,
It's-
the way you said that, actions that create bad outcomes. Like a hurricane isn't an
right.
action.
It's a bad thing, but it's not evil because I agree.
That's what I mean.
I get
Actions,
what you're
that's
saying.
a good way
I
to put
agree
it.
with it. So yeah, actions that cause pain and suffering, I think, are generally evil, whereas actions that cause like joy and happiness
Right.
would be good, right? But I have to put a caveat on the pain and suffering thing because I think there is like productive pain and
yeah.
suffering,
Certainly.
and that's good too.
I think there's also evil joy and happiness.
Yeah, like almost like if you're like spending your whole life having fun.
Right. Like there's a certain way that hedonism turns bad, you know? I mean, maybe even just hedonism itself is necessarily that way, but like if you are seeking pleasure to the extent that you are overlooking other things in life,
Right.
like it's not all about just happiness or pleasure. I think there's other things that maybe you could put under the term like well-being.
Yeah.
For instance, you could maybe put some pain into the category of well-being, pain that is necessary. Something as simple as like exercising or working out can be painful,
Yeah.
but it's good for you. Like productive.
Yeah, right. There's like never gonna, you can't live a life that doesn't have struggle, right? There's no like living life without any type of pain and suffering, but actions that cause like unnecessary or unproductive pain and suffering.
Yeah, unnecessary is a good qualifying term.
I think those are like bad or evil.
Yeah.
And I think that another like way that I think about good and evil, I think oftentimes like selfishness is evil. But I have to put a caveat on that too.
There's a caveat for everything. Like legitimately.
In my mind.
Yeah. Mine too, I think.
So like, because like there are people who are very selfless to the point that like they hurt themselves or can never get ahead in their own life because they're always trying to do for others.
Yeah.
And like that's not, you have to be selfish enough to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Because not taking care of yourself is actually selfish because now other people have to worry about you.
Yeah. Yeah. You're placing the burden of your life onto others.
Yeah. So it's like take care of yourself first.
Right.
But then like when that selfishness becomes like imbalanced, then you're stepping into like the grounds of evil. It's sort of like the word fair comes to my mind a lot. Like what's your fair share?
Yeah. I think fairness definitely has a lot to do with morality, but it isn't morality in its entirety either. But what you're saying about the selfishness or selflessness, there's definitely a point where you can be too self-sacrificial. I mean, I guess one of the greatest examples of like self-sacrifice is like Jesus. I think maybe Jesus was too self-sacrificial. Like I don't necessarily think turning the other cheek is a good motto. You know?
Not always. Yeah, I think you got to defend yourself at some point, right? You got to stand up for yourself.
Yeah, like you're not actually putting very much goodness into the world if you're just letting people trample on top of you.
Yeah.
Out of pacifism or something.
Yeah. I agree totally. I think that, well, I don't know. I just agree. I don't know what to say about that.
Although with selfishness, I think there definitely with anything on this spectrum or continuum, there's definitely a point where it becomes evil, but I don't think selfishness itself is necessarily evil. I think you can be wisely selfish or selfish in a way where your concept of self can be bigger than just your bodily self.
Yeah.
I could put my concept of self in the terms of my community.
Yeah.
Or even my entire planet.
Yeah.
I could do like say environmentally conscious things with motivations of selfishness because I want to live in a sustainable world.
Yes. Yeah.
In which case my actions are completely good, I think. But my intentions
that
are
change
selfish.
in what you think of as self, or like me being like, I'm okay with not having like a very extravagant life materially.
Yeah.
Like I wish we kind of built a world where like things were shared more evenly because I just want to live in a world where like my neighbors are happy.
Right.
And where like people, even though I'm never going to meet them, like knowing that people in other countries are like doing okay, you know, like that makes me feel good. So it's not like selfishness is bad, but it's like when your selfishness
at the expense of others.
And at some point, a lot of times I think it can be at the expense of others.
Yeah, it certainly can be. But I just like to make that statement because a lot of people, I think, in their minds, selfishness is equal to badness.
Yeah, it's too simple a way of looking at it.
Yeah. There's always a more complicated but accurate way to look at things, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's complicated. I said something about like fair slice of the pie, and
Right.
there's these numbers that I love so much. If you take the entire world economy, like it's something like $20 trillion or something is like the amount of like value that's created by the entire world in 1 year.
Okay.
Like the global GDP is like 20 trillion, and you divide that by like the 7.8 billion people, and you get $10,000 a year per man, woman, and child.
Only 10,000?
Yeah, per man, woman, and child, and elder. So that means like an elderly couple would get $20,000 a year. A family of 4 would have $40,000 a year. You know,
Yeah.
Me as like a single guy, $10,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's the global number. If you take the same numbers for the United States, like the total United States GDP, and divide it by the 330 million people, you get about $40,000 per man, woman, and child. Yeah. So that means a family of 4, if they had like, would have $160,000 a year.
Yeah. And that is not actually what the average family of 4 has.
No, it's something like 30 or 40,000.
Yeah, the wealth inequality that exists in this country is mind-blowing.
It's evil.
It is evil.
Right? Because it causes unnecessary suffering.
Yeah.
Right?
This is something that came up in now my previous 2 podcast episodes, but it's fine. But
it's a popular topic right now.
Yeah. Well, so the number, at least as of last I heard, which is probably years ago, so it probably should be updated, but the number that guarantees your happiness, or at least likely guarantees your happiness, of money you make in a year is, I think, something like $100,000 a year.
Yeah, it is something like that. Yeah.
So it is unnecessary.
You're talking about like that curve that kind of like
Right.
plateaus, like your happiness goes up, and then
as you make more money, and then it kind of just plateaus off.
You have everything you could want.
Right. Yeah, and you can buy more things, but they're not actually increasing your happiness anymore after that point.
Right.
So it is unnecessary. It's causing unnecessary suffering for all the people who have more money than they could ever even hope for, like having an idea of what to do with.
Yeah. Like let's say I'm a surgeon, right? And I'm making like $300,000 a year. I'm some hotshot, jack surgeon, and like I want to buy my 3rd fancy car for $100,000, right? And it's not really bringing me much more because I already have 2 fancy cars that go fast. But like, what would that $100,000 do for a family that's doesn't have a car?
Yeah,
they could buy like 2 or like they could buy 2 cars, maybe buy a house, like down payment on a house, and like it would bring them so much like security,
right?
Like to be able to like, oh, I have a reliable car to get to work. I have a reliable car to drop my kids off at school. Like I own my own house. Like it's gonna bring them so much.
Yeah, the proportion
security.
The proportion of their happiness that it will add is way greater than the proportion of your happiness.
Right. It's like almost like it's got to be huge, like 100 times more effective use of resources in terms of creating happiness.
Yeah. If our brains were like adequately tuned to actually increasing the world's happiness, like that would be a no-brainer decision to just give your extra money to people that are in more need than you are. But we don't do that. I'm sure maybe that doctor that's getting $300,000 a year donates some of his money to charity, but he certainly still has more than enough left over.
I have a problem with charity, though.
Oh yeah, what's that?
It's not like the worst thing you could do. It's like good, but have you heard of like mutual aid?
Not sure.
So, like charity, the difference between like charity and mutual aid is that with charity, powerful people and wealthy people are still controlling what's done with the resources. And it kind of assumes that like what's best for other people. But that sometimes might be the case, but more often I feel like people know what they need for themselves better than I do. And like, so what mutual aid does is the people with resources and the people without resources work together on even ground instead of the people with resources kind of coming at it from a top-down approach of being like we're controlling this, we know what to do. It's more like, we want to help, what do you need? Let's create it together.
Are there a lot of these companies or organizations?
Mutual aid organizations? It's just like a new topic, and some of like DSA and some of the other that's Democratic Socialists of America and other groups are really pushing for this idea of we're not giving things away to people from like our perspective of what we think they need. It's like we are asking other people what they need and then seeing what we can do to help them get it.
Yeah.
So it's a growing idea.
Okay. So you're saying that would be better if people did that rather than charity?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think so.
I don't remember the name of it, but there's this one charity organization that's basically tries to see where your money can be most effective in the world. Say if you're just like a rich person and you want to give to charity, but you don't necessarily know where to give it to, you might just give it to Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Foundation.
Sure.
But then that might not be the very best cent for cent allocation of your resources.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like for every $100,000 they get, they cure one person of breast cancer. Or I don't know what the numbers are. Just wild example. But then if you were instead to donate to like trying to cure malaria in Africa, like every like 5 cents saves one person from malaria.
Yeah.
So it's like it just tries to hook you up with the organizations that are going to save the most amount of lives and prevent the most amount of misery.
Yeah.
That you can. I don't remember what it's called, but might be easy to find with a Google search.
A lot of people have like sort of issues that are personal to them, you know? Like they have a person in their family that died from breast cancer, so like it hits harder for them, and then they want to give to that. They don't know anybody who's gotten malaria, so it's just like it's not on their mind, you know? I mean, I think that's unfortunate, but that's just the way people are. They're very centered on
like what they know and
what they know and their family, and like kind of like screw everyone else.
Yeah, it's you kind of forget what you don't experience. You just hear about something that happens somewhere far away, and it doesn't resonate with you as much as actually vividly seeing something, like if your sister gets breast cancer.
Right.
I think it's called effective altruism, something like that. That's the movement or website that I'm talking about.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's worth looking up.
Yeah. So do you think there is any, it's back to the whole ignorance in the root of it thing.
Oh, right.
Do you think there is actually a singular root of evil that you could attribute it to?
I don't think it is just ignorance. I think evil's actually, now I'm an atheist, you know, both my parents were atheists. I've always been an atheist or an agnostic.
Yeah.
But I do think that the Bible got something right when they said like sin is inherent in man. And I think it's right because of my research in biology, and I got pretty into evolutionary biology and read some Richard Dawkins. Yeah. And I just think about a lot of things in terms of evolutionary biology. And basically what happens in evolution is anything that can survive, like what happens with the DNA is it mutates randomly. So it's creating over time every possible like version of each segment of DNA, and it's testing them out to see if they can survive. And anything that can survive will survive. So like selflessness is a good survival strategy, because if you are willing to feed your community member when they're hungry, and they also have that same genetics of selflessness, they're going to feed you when they are hungry, right? So it's like there's a benefit there. We help each other. Or like I have certain abilities and you have certain abilities. If I share my like proclivities for getting certain things done and you share different proclivities for getting things done, then we can work together and do better as a group. But selfishness is also an effective survival strategy. If it's just like, well, I'll kill you and steal your stuff, like that works too.
Yeah.
So like that exists in humans. Like that capability is there.
Yeah, the thing, it's like in The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins.
Yes, that's
yeah, towards the end of the book,
a great book.
he goes through a bunch of like game theory type strategies for how people, not people, but like,
Animals
or these hypothetical machines could behave in their environments. And then each one has, a little name for it. So like if you're having somebody who is super pacifist and just is helpful and all that, they call it a dove. And then if you've got somebody who is really aggressive and takes what they want, they call it a hawk.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this like a number of doves that exist in the population that is ideal, and if you introduce like some hawks into there, they will thrive. But if like they'll take advantage of the doves in their willingness to help you out, and they'll kill them off and all that. But then if the hawks like take over too much of the population, then it becomes not beneficial for the hawks anymore, because now everybody is aggressive and everybody's fighting with each other.
There's not enough victims to take advantage of.
You need people to exploit.
Yeah.
So there's this balance between doves and hawks in the population, people that are helpful, and then they can make a roughly good calculation that the odds are the person they're helping is also a dove.
Yeah.
Except they're not always a dove, so that way the hawks can actually benefit from doves helping them out. And then, they stab in the back in return.
Yeah.
So there's this there's this kind of give and take between these personality types of selfishness and selflessness.
Right.
That kind of guarantee that selfishness will stick around.
Yeah, even in small numbers, which I think is how it is with humans. I don't think most people operate most of the time selfishly.
Yeah.
But I do think that people with these selfish proclivities, and I don't even necessarily mean that like certain people genetically are selfish, but that we all genetically have that capability, but more so psychologically on a decision basis, that certain people choose to pursue that selfish strategy in life, and that those people tend to gain a lot of power over like the systems that we create, our culture and our lives, like our collective lives.
Yeah.
And it's kind of scary. And sometimes I wish the doves would do something about it.
Yeah. It seems almost like kind of guaranteed to happen. And of course, this is more simplistic than, there's more than just doves and hawks. There's the tit for tats and like all the other different game theory strategies you could follow. But let's say if it's just only hawks and doves in this example, it seems almost guaranteed that the people with power would be the hawks, because of these two people, who's going to be the more ambitious one? Who's going to be the one who is willing to do things that, maybe the doves aren't willing to do? If you're a person who wants to get a position of power, you're probably a hawk, not a dove. Doves probably are likely to not desire things for themselves because they're selfless.
Well, if there is a dove type person who goes after power, usually the hawks kill them.
Yeah, that too. if they do make the effort, then
the hawks get threatened and they're like, oh, we got to get rid of this guy or the girl.
This kind of makes me think of like good and evil and movies.
Yeah.
So, and how like in movies or just, your stereotypical storylines, good always wins. Except I don't know how likely that actually is, because if you look at, just the stereotypical sides of good and evil, the evil ones are willing to do anything. The good people have a rule set that they're not willing to break the rules. Typically.
Well, in the movies, the good guys are usually willing to kill the bad guys.
Yeah.
So they're willing to do that. Doesn't seem to be the case in real life.
Yeah. But I mean, even still, like, I guess usually it seems like the good guys are reluctant about killing the bad guys, but they're forced into it. Yeah. They inevitably they do kill them, even though they're, begrudging about it.
So is that good?
Is it good to kill bad people? Maybe. I don't know if I'd want to use the word good. Maybe it's neutral. It's like neutralizing evil.
If you look at good and evil, good actions being those that create good outcomes, right? And actually, then I think it would be because you're eliminating bad outcomes,
right?
So you're creating space for good to thrive. So wouldn't it be a good action?
Okay, so this is, I guess, getting us into utilitarianism and maybe some issues that could be there. So if you're looking at it only in terms of outcomes, that would be like a consequentialist view of it, where the consequence of the
Mm,
action is the thing that makes the action good or bad.
right.
But is there anything to say about the fact that you're killing someone? And like,
Absolutely.
is killing someone just in the act itself, in a deontological sense, is that bad? So you might be ensuring more good outcomes by killing a bad, like a villain, but you're also killing them. You're also kind of setting up the
So
example
you're
to the world
this
that
is the
it
way
is
I look
okay to
this is the
kill.
way that I look at it, is that we don't live in a static world, right? We live in a
Right.
dynamic world in which time is flowing. And at any moment in time, you could like theoretically like add up all the good and bad that exists in the world in that moment through people's like situations and feelings about their lives, and you could get like a net good or bad,
Sure.
right? The moment that the hero has to like fight the bad guys
Yeah.
is going to cause pain. It's going to cause pain for the hero because, like you said, a good person is reluctant. It's going to hurt inside
Yeah, it's going to cause
for
psychological
them.
torment for themselves.
It is. But if doing so can create a longer period of time in which good is able to thrive, then maybe it weighs out positive in the long
Right.
run.
Yeah, I think I would subscribe to that notion as well. I think like
It's kind of
Dion.
like the Pax Romana idea, right? The idea that you go through all this war
Yeah.
to create some lasting period of peace. So you go through this really intense, terrible time for everybody, and there's lots of death and suffering and war, but then like you're able to create like peace and order.
Right. Although that does introduce some scary potentials for you could see a world where maybe some dystopian sort of society where you have this intense period of war and struggle for the end result of peace, except was the war actually like justified? Are you just kind of killing off people who disagree with you just so that you can
Create peace.
create peace?
Yeah, it's complicated. I think a lot of the times.
Because even like you could have a evil person or whatever. You could have a superhero villain just killing off all the good guys, and then there's peace afterwards because they got what they wanted. They got control, and there's nobody left over to have any
Well,
problems, say anything against
I want
the
to
regime.
rewind. I want to rewind again.
Sure.
We defined evil. Well, we kind of were defining both good and bad, right? But I want to talk more about like what is good. And I think I
Okay.
said like, like actions that create like joy and happiness, right?
Yeah.
But like what is happiness? Like how do we create happiness, right?
Yeah.
Like to me happiness comes from, in a lot of ways it has to do with like creating order and like creating security.
Right.
Like I feel I've in the past I was not so happy, but I've come to a place where I'm very happy with my life. And the things that allow me to be happy are the fact that I have clean water that comes out of my sink.
Mm-hmm.
I have food in my cupboard. I feel secure in my job that I have a place that I can contribute to my community through my work, and that I'm going to get compensated in return by my community. And I feel secure. And from that place, I can pursue productive struggles of learning new hobbies or trying to change the political landscape in my city. And like, so I can pursue these really like purposeful and meaningful things in my life, where I can just like enjoy my free time in ways that people who are stressed about where their food is coming from or how they're going to pay their rent, like those people I think probably have a hard time enjoying themselves, even if they have free time, because there's all this stress.
Yeah.
So I was like, how can we create a world where more people feel safe and secure? I think that's like happiness. That's how we create more happiness in the world.
I've got a few things to say about that, I guess. One of them is that this stability or security and order and happiness, I don't think those are necessarily good things. I think you can have an order or a security in your life that is predicated on evil. For instance, like the example I was just failing to describe, of just killing like revolutionaries so that you have societal stability. And even if those revolutionaries have valid criticisms of the way you're running the world, if you just squelch them, now the people can be happy that the people who just want to continue on with their stability and don't care too much. Like if you're in 1830 and you're Andrew Johnson or whatever, just have the Native Americans go die on the Trail of Tears, and the white people can keep their little security bubbles.
So
And also,
I guess I don't mean order as in keeping things the same. I mean, I guess it's more the word security.
Right.
Sort of like people feeling safe and having their basic needs met.
right. But you could, and then here's another thing with the consequentialism is that, like, how many people? Is it just the majority of the people? Because you could pursue security and safety for the majority while taking advantage of, like, by destroying the minority, you could, like, make the majority prosper. Is that still a good
Sort
thing?
of like how America did with slavery, right?
Yeah.
Like you have one group of people that's like very oppressed, but it's like
Yeah.
helping everybody else to be
Right.
secure.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, all these people are, enslaved and all that, but for the majority of the population, we have, nice, cheap, comfortable lives.
Yeah, I don't think that was worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, the psychological trauma, the physical abuse that those people went through was so terrible. I don't think it was worth. And this is where it comes to like back to the selfishness thing. Like, if your security is at the expense
Of another.
or creating suffering for somebody else, that's not worth it. And
Right.
and this is where I come to like socialism as an answer. Or I don't even like to use that word because a lot of people have like ideas about it that might not necessarily be what I mean by the word, but just like a fair distribution of resources. I don't think it's fair that, capital gains, like somebody who invests in the stock market and has capital gains, that they're paying less in taxes than somebody that is working for money.
Right.
Like, that's not fair.
I think maybe we needed to define fairness. Because I think somebody who is making money off of capital gains would disagree with you and think that it's not fair to punish, quote unquote, punish them for being a hardworking capitalist.
Well, they're wrong. I mean,
from the perspective of somebody who's making lots of money, you're like unnecessarily taking from them what they rightfully, fairly acquired in order to give to someone who is less hardworking or whatever term they would use. So I think, like, I don't know, like fairness, we have to agree on what that means before, like.
So this is why I think democracy is the best way to figure out how to create, a system that's going to maximize happiness and minimize suffering, because lots of different people have different ideas about what's fair and what's right. And I think it's best that we go forward with the ideas that match the majority of people. You can't create a perfect world that's going to make everyone happy. So the idea, in my mind, is to try and create a world where the most people are happy and the least people are suffering.
Right.
And an actual functioning democracy, not like the one that we have, but, like a functioning democracy that actually responds to like what people think is good, I think is a great way to go about making people happier.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to just be like, well, I'm right and they're wrong. But if, 60% of people believe that it's not fair to tax work more than capital investment, then I think that's what we should go with.
I feel like this comes back to that problem of majority again, though. And this is one critique of democracy in general, I guess. If 60% of the people believe something completely horrible, like, do we go with that just because the majority of the people are into it? Like, if 60% of the people think that we should perform female genital mutilation, do we do that? So I think,
yeah, it's a tough question.
That's like the ancient critique that Socrates, if he existed, more likely Plato, made about democracy, is that you've kind of got this tyranny of the masses. If it's in a complete democracy, like, I guess right now we're trying to make it a democratic republic so we can cancel out some of the hysteria that can result from like mob rule. But there are circumstances where if you just go with what the majority believes, the majority isn't always right.
Yeah, but I think the majority will learn.
Right.
So I think that is our best option, is to just go with what the majority thinks, and that it's not going to be perfect, but I think that people I mean, I have faith in people. I think people are pretty smart, and I think most of us operate unselfishly most of the time. I think most people want to live in a world that isn't full of suffering, and
Right.
I do think the majority will make the best decisions, if not in the moment, that they will revise those decisions based on the outcomes. I mean, I think humans have scientific minds that look at cause and effect, and that, you know, they'll see the outcomes of a certain policy, and if they're not good, I think the people will create new policies that are better.
So your outlook on humanity is ultimately like a optimistic one, you would say? So it sounds like.
I think human beings are smart, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree so much with that premise or that idea. I don't know that humans have scientific minds, generally speaking. I think many of them do, and that's good. But I don't know. I think the average uneducated person has some issues with grasping facts or cause and effect.
Yeah, I think no. See, I think they're good at cause and effect. I think oftentimes they're operating with
False facts or
false facts.
Yeah.
Which is really problematic. It's really that's the ignorance, right? People are trying to do the right thing, and like, oh man, it's so hard because we've been talking about like good people, bad people, but really we're all a mixture of those things, right?
Yeah, there's good and bad contained within everyone.
Like even the worst person, like they're probably really good to their close friends, even if they're like a ruthless businessman who like treats their employees like terribly. Like they might like they're probably super great to their family and their close friends and like super generous, and so like they're a good person.
Are they?
but like they're just like I don't know what allows them to.
What do you think it takes to make a good person? Like you just said, do you think that if you are a really great friend to your close friends, but you're just an asshole to like anybody else that you meet, are you a good person? It's like, do you think there's a certain like threshold that you have to pass in order to be a good person?
I don't know, like when you go to St. Peter, you know, and he's at the Golden Gates, and he's gonna go through every decision you made in your life, and he's gonna like weigh the good and the bad outcomes of your actions and decisions, and like, then he's gonna look at that. I mean, my go-to number is people are probably 50-50.
Yeah.
You know, but what makes a good person? I don't know, you'd have to do that moral arithmetic and just add it all up, and if you're over 50%, I guess you're a good person.
That's all it takes, just a majority? Like, it doesn't even take a 66% or...
Well, I mean, there's good and then there's bad. Like, it's on a spectrum, right. You know, everything's on a spectrum in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, though, I would place the... maybe like 40 to 60%.
Sure.
In
so
like
you're creating,
you're just
so
like
you have like neutral people,
person.
bad and good.
Yeah.
So you got to hit like the 65%.
Yeah. If you're just 51%, I don't think you're really good. You're like, yeah, you're okay.
You're okay.
You're not bad.
Yeah, you're not.
But I wouldn't say you're a good person.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do you think that humans are like innately good or bad or something? Like
no, like I said earlier, I think the capacity for both exists.
Yeah.
I heard recently, I listened to NPR, and there was like a story about how poor people tend to be nice and rich people tend to be mean. And the explanation that the professor that was talking was giving was that rich people don't need anything from anybody.
Yeah.
So they don't need to be nice to you because they don't need anything from you. Whereas a poor person generally tends to be kind to other people because they need other people.
Yeah, they're dependent on each other.
Right.
That's kind of sad to me. It's like, it almost seems like you're good because you're sucking up. And then, or you're nice because you're sucking up, like you're trying to schmooze people. And then, you know, there's no reason to do that if you don't need them.
I think what makes a good person is somebody who considers how their actions affect other people.
Just the considering of it?
And wanting to not hurt others.
Yeah. Do you think that necessarily follows from if you're even doing the like thinking about how my actions affect other people? Do you think you're necessarily then likely to care afterwards? Because I've had conversations with people who understand the consequences of their actions, but then tell me.
Yeah, it's sort of it's like the fuck you attitude. It's just like, well,
Yeah.
Too bad. Who said life was going to be fair?
Yeah.
I'm winning, you're losing. Who cares?
Right.
Not me. Yeah, those in my mind, that's a bad way of thinking.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go completely just say that's a bad person, because like I said, there could be a lot of good things that they're doing, and they might just sort of be like a neutral person. But like that part of them is bad.
Right.
They shouldn't think that way.
Have you ever seen the TV show The Good Place?
We just started the first episode last night.
Okay. I think you'll really like it.
I didn't.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe I need to give it more of a chance.
yeah. I guess I didn't mean the first episode. I actually have talked to a few people who didn't like the first episode.
You gotta really watch it.
Yeah. I guess it requires more of your time, but I think give it until at least watch season 1, and if you dislike that, then I guess you dislike it. But
okay.
But yeah, the first episode is kind of weird and wonky, and it has this like over the top sequence that I think isn't characteristic of the rest of the show, and I think it definitely grows on you as well. But yeah, it's a lot. It's about like morality and ethics a lot. Yeah, it's very interesting.
It's like heaven, but not heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting premise. It's a very interesting premise. I probably will give it another watch.
And listener, if you're at all interested in ethics and what makes a person good, I think The Good Place is very interesting and funny. I'm a big fan.
like Becker. What's his name? What's the actor's name?
For who?
The guy who plays the guy in charge.
Oh,
he used to play Becker,
yeah.
the doctor on TV. You know that?
I'm forgetting his name right now.
That disgruntled doctor on TV.
He plays Michael in the show.
Yeah, I like him. He's funny to me.
Do you think you're a good person?
People have told me I am.
Really?
So yeah, I've done things that I regret.
Right. I think maybe the fact that you regret them is probably at least some indication of goodness.
Well, yeah, I mean, I saw that my actions had hurt other people.
Yeah.
And I decided I never wanted to act like that again.
Yeah.
So I tried to figure out like where that came from in my psyche, and I realized it was a lot of like problems about my behavior that I had sort of inherited from my father, like bad behavioral patterns that were shown to me, like this is how you act, and I just sort of acted that way. But when I saw how much, well, first of all, like seeing how my father's behavior was hurting people around him, and then seeing how my similar behavior was hurting people around me, I had to change myself.
So when we talk about good and evil, are you imagining that these are just like behaviors that are in people, like ideas, or are you in any way putting this in terms of like actual forces that exist in the world? There is a force of goodness or a force of evil.
No, not exactly. Although I think it's sort of useful to talk about it in that terms,
right?
Especially with some people who sort of their minds think like that.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, that could be a way that you think about it. That like, especially considering what I had said about it sort of existing in the DNA, these different survival strategies, and that some of them are more ruthless and heartless, and some of them are more compassionate and collaborative. So in a way, they are existent forces within human nature.
Yeah, but if anything, it's perhaps more metaphorical than literal. Or
I'm very much a materialist.
Yeah, same.
I mentioned being an atheist, and then I said maybe an agnostic. Like, I'm willing to at times like consider things that might exist outside of the material world that we know, but I don't find that to be so useful, because I don't see a way that we can know about them, what the nature of those things are. So it's like, well, that's not really useful to me.
It's not practical.
It's not practical. So like I just focus on like what I think, what's real, what's material, and by material I also mean energy and light as well, and all of that. Like, by understanding that, then you have the power to create the outcomes you want. And if you're a good person, that gives you the power to create good in the world around you. So
one thing I was talking about before that now I'm wondering about you and even me is, do you think that these like being a bad person would have to do with choices? Like, for instance, if you have maybe some sort of problems with your brain so far that you are like legitimately a psychopath.
Yeah.
Are you an evil person? Because if it's something that's kind of beyond your control,
this is interesting, right? Because this is like the blame game.
Yeah.
So we got sociopaths.
Yeah.
Antisocial personality disorder. It's like 1% to 2% of the people on the planet is the numbers that I've heard, which is like a lot. Most people probably know one, or at least have met one.
Yeah.
But like, that's 1 in 50 people or 1 in 100 people. Or like, you know, oftentimes people who are abused become abusers, right? Is that their fault? And almost like, as a materialist and as somebody who believes in science, I'm like sort of like a fatalist type of person as well. Like I almost believe that like outcomes are
like a determinist.
Like a determinist, yes. Yeah. Like everything that happened before is going to create what happens
like if
next.
you could gather all the information that is here right now, you could predict exactly the next moment.
Exactly. So that means that none of us are to blame for anything.
Right. In that way, there's no free will.
But then if you think that way,
yes,
then it becomes an excuse to act however you want. So even if that's true, I think people must, even if choice is an illusion,
right,
we must still act as though we had choice.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely.
Yeah.
Although I think there is a way to frame it where you don't really, by dismissing free will because you realize we live in a, at least mostly deterministic world, I don't think that necessarily is a good reason to just do whatever you want, because it's still the case that people, like, even if it's not a choice, people still feel pain and happiness, and you're still, by just causing chaos for the fun of it because you're not in control of your choices, there's still incentive for the society to prevent you from doing that, and for you yourself to not do that, because you're still like harming things. It's not like, oh, I don't have free will, might as well just go kill some people. Like, now you're killing people, and these people have experiences and have lives that they probably cherish.
Yeah.
Even if they don't consciously choose to cherish them of their own free will.
And the thing is, you don't, like, what? You don't have free will, so... No, I don't even want to go down that path. It's not, like I said, it's not a useful way of thinking. Because we don't know all of the inputs, and we don't know how to calculate the next moment. Like,
yeah, it's like a theoretical, or like, yeah, it's potentially we could have deterministic predictions of the world, but like really we can't. We don't have that processing power.
Isn't there like another theory in physics that like every like something to do with the electron, and it can be anywhere at any moment or something, and that like every moment in time, like reality is like fracturing into every single possible like outcome.
Worlds. Yeah.
So I guess I kind of like, even though it's simpler to just think that there's one timeline that like it's determined, it's almost like maybe all of the outcomes exist and you can choose which one your consciousness like goes into.
Yeah.
But that's all like weird stuff.
Well, I mean, I guess phrasing it that way would make it like a mind-body duality, where your consciousness is not part of your body. Because if it were multiple worlds, your consciousness would go down every path.
Yeah, your consciousness would be shattering as well.
Yeah. It wouldn't be one consciousness. It would be an infinite amount.
Yeah.
So really, you're going down every choice you could have ever made.
Yeah, that just gets too out of reality for me. I would rather just focus on how to be a good person.
Right. So when you think of like goodness or evil or whatever, good and evil, do you think this is a primarily human thing? Or do you think like animals can also be accused of, evil actions, evil intent or whatnot?
I think it's primarily a human thing to think of it in these terms.
Well, yeah.
In nature, there's just those that survive and those that don't.
Right. But are we not nature as well?
We are. Human beings have developed an interesting thing, which is that we've evolved to have brains that can choose to go against our instincts. And this is where, like, even if like somebody was taught and shown as a child or in their life, and they grew up in a culture that might have taught them some what I would consider evil things like greed and selfishness and homophobia and patriarchy and things like this that I consider to be bad. that they can choose to overcome that programming.
Right.
And even if like there is a survival strategy of like hurting others to get ahead, and that we all have like that capability and proclivity, we can choose to go against it because there are other survival strategies to choose.
Yeah.
That create less suffering.
I guess we should remember that saying choose is just like a useful word, not necessarily a actual choice. But yeah.
No, it is a choice.
Well, I mean, sure, a choice, but I'm just trying to put it in terms of like the free will thing we just said. It's a...
See, I choose to operate
yeah, on the basis of
free will, even if it doesn't exist.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
And I think everybody should, because you can't calculate who you were meant to be, so you might as well choose the best you that you can.
I was just trying to cover the basis so somebody listening is like, you just said free will doesn't exist. Now you're using the word choose?
Yeah, but hopefully it's clear now to the listener that like...
Yeah. So like a sense of restraint is what you're talking about that humans have? Because I feel like animals have that too. At least certain animals you could find definitely have the ability to not act instinctually all the time.
Yeah, I think it's on a spectrum.
Right.
But that,
You're just saying it's primarily like just useful to only put it in human terms because
other animals are mostly operating on instinct. So I don't think there is as much choice involved. Animals don't have the same... I think where choice comes from is from the human's ability to perceive time, both the past and the future.
Think about the future.
And look at and the ability to look at cause and effect and like grapple with those and like being able to choose the actions that we want to take to create the outcomes that we want. I think animal brains, if they have that, it's in a very limited capacity.
Yeah, it's probably more, limited than humans, I guess. But if anything has taught us like about human or animals' ability to really cause and effect, like any experiment with lab rats shows that
they learn.
They're very capable of anticipating the future and knowing what causes what.
But to what extent? Like how much future?
How far into the future?
Yeah.
Yeah, not sure, but...
And how far into the past?
Is there a certain farness into the future that you need for ethical thinking, do you think?
Well, it comes back to ignorance, right? So, like, if, like, humans have developed, well, first of all, like, we developed verbal language and passed down stories, and then written language, and now, like, internet and media like that. So, but the ability to catalog past events and see what worked and what didn't, I think to be ignorant of that isn't good, because then like you're gonna make possibly the same mistakes that like our ancestors already made. It's like, well, we shouldn't do that. Like, because now it's causing unnecessary pain and suffering.
Yeah. Okay. This is not something I subscribe to at all, but I'm gonna ask you anyway because it is something that is really annoying when people ask me. So I'm sorry, but I just want to know what you think. What do you think of when somebody throws at you like, well, why are you assuming that pain and suffering are bad? Like, why do you put it in terms of this is good, that's bad?
It's like the sort of don't yuck my yum. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's
I can gather what it means.
Queer culture, and oftentimes like don't yuck their yum. If they like to get choked or whatever.
Don't fetish shame.
Yeah.
Okay.
My brother has actually talked to me about this a lot. He's very into pain and suffering, not in a sexual way, at least not that I know of. but this goes back to like my whole thing about like productive pain and suffering. So I think they're like when you choose it, like when you're coming from a place of security where your necessities are met and you feel safe, but you're choosing to push yourself to learn and to grow. Yeah. Like, I think that type of pain is, in a sense, enjoyable. Right. I mean, like going to the gym you mentioned. Yeah. Or like even like studying really hard in college. Like, it's painful at times. You're just like going at the book and you're just like forcing yourself to do things that you don't want to do in the moment, but they're very rewarding in the long term.
Actually, I meant this in a different way.
Sorry.
I think I should have just described it differently. I think when people bring this up to me, what they mean it in terms of moral nihilism, such as like, how can you, like, why are you saying that anything is good or bad? Like, why are you saying there's a distinction to be made at all between good and bad?
Okay, my response to that is, it's just my personal opinion, man.
So then, if somebody has a different opinion, like if they don't think that there's any basis at all for good or badness, you would like not try to convince them of it, or you wouldn't have anything to say to them?
No, I don't think I would try and convince them of it. I would try and maybe provide examples of how many people in the world would agree with me that pain and suffering is bad, and therefore, for those people,
yeah,
they should do that for those people.
Okay.
They should attempt to create a world with less of that so other people can be happy.
All right. So it's interesting. Is this like, I guess, definition of good and bad, is it it's resting on like a collective agreement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it very much does for me, because I've spent a lot of time in my life trying to figure out what right and wrong is.
Yeah.
But ultimately, and I'm pretty confident in some of my ideas, but if I meet somebody and I'm talking to them, I'm very willing to set my ideas aside and really hear them out as to what they think an ideal world looks like. Because in my mind, I can't have a good world that's just good in my mind.
Yeah.
Because if other people don't like that world, then it's not good. So yeah, it's very much based on the idea that most people want the same things.
Okay. Yeah, that I think is more intelligible to me. That rather than just being about whatever anybody says they think is good, it's just more based on the fact that since we have shared biology, we necessarily
have a lot in common.
And react to pain with, avoidance.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I get that.
But I do find it, on the other hand, I do find I think we were talking about having too much fun or being too comfortable is also bad. I think about they tried to ban sugary, the Big Gulp sugary sodas in New York City, and there was apparently some uproar you're taking away my freedom to drink
a gallon of
soda,
sugar water.
And is freedom good?
Oh, I don't think freedom has any I'm not even sure if freedom and good are in the same universe.
Yeah,
I think freedom can go in any direction, and it doesn't necessarily mean good or bad.
Because does that mean I'm free to exploit other people? Does that mean I'm free to just destroy things?
Right. Well, I mean, the way I would characterize freedom, or what freedom we should strive for, is you have ultimate freedoms until they infringe upon somebody else's freedoms.
It's do what you want. Yeah, one of the earliest as a young person, I was trying to figure out what rules do I live by. Right. My parents are putting all these rules on me, and I'm questioning whether or not they're good.
Right. And
one of the earliest conclusions I came to is people should do what they want without hurting others.
Yeah.
It seems simple, but you have to figure it out in every circumstance. Am I hurting other people? But then it's but what if it's good for me
to hurt other people?
What if I'm doing something that's good for me, but it's hurting somebody else?
Right. And then in that case, I would say that you just don't do it.
Here's an interesting question for you.
Okay.
Would you prefer a planet that is a lifeless rock, or a planet that's full of pain and suffering?
I mean, it's kind of a hard question to answer.
Let's say it's 25% joy and happiness being experienced by the life on the planet, and 75% pain and suffering.
Okay, so I have an answer.
So it's a bad world.
Right.
But would you rather that or a lifeless rock?
Okay, so I have an answer, but before I say it, I mean, it's just I couldn't even have a preference in the first world because I wouldn't be there, because I wouldn't exist on this world that's lifeless. Unless you're saying I'm the only person there and I just observe that it's lifeless. But no, I would definitely choose the second one, I think. I don't know. I might disagree with myself later if I thought about it a little bit more, but I think I would prefer the worst of all possible worlds over no world at all.
I think so too. And my basis for that is just science is showing us that most of the universe is lifeless, right?
Yeah.
So it just sort of feels like awesome to just be alive and like have a planet that's full of life. It just it feels so rare and special, even if a lot of the times we feel like, oh, it's such a bad place. Like, why are humans so bad?
Yeah.
But like, we get to be here.
Yeah, and it seems like even when people are living in complete misery, they still seem to prefer living over not.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, people kill themselves, but I don't think most people do.
Most people don't. Most people continue struggling through
Yeah.
pain.
And I
for
mean,
those moments, for just those
Yeah.
moments when, you know, maybe they can get drunk and forget about it
Yeah,
all,
right.
or just
Even
like
in like
see
horrible
their
existence.
grandchild get born or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, even in like a completely horrible life, not every single moment of it is horrible. There are some that are really great, or at least good,
Yeah.
or good by comparison, anyway. And there's also that like hope element. Like even say you are the constructor of worlds, and you can just I choose the option that you have made, either like lifeless world or 70%, 75% misery world. There's the possibility that after I choose that second world,
It could transform
become
into
a better world.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I mean, that might happen after I'm dead, but it could still happen.
Which makes me think about the possibility of environmental collapse on our planet.
Right.
Is it worth it for us to keep pursuing continued consumption of the environment, destruction of the environment for our happiness? Because it could be argued that all of these things that we're chopping down rainforests to
Right.
mine resources, and we're turning living things into dead products that bring us joy and happiness. Is that worth it? Is that good? Because it's bringing us joy and happiness.
I would say no. One reason is because I think it's limiting the total amount of joy and happiness that could be had in the long run.
Yeah. Because if the planet dies.
Right. Like there's a sense in the way that non-sustainable things like necessarily limit happiness that can be had, because you're running out of your things that you
eventually possibly
using.
becoming a lifeless rock where there's no possibility for any experience of joy ever again on the planet.
Yeah.
It's a scary thought.
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily the case that my happiness or anybody's happiness has to be diminished by stopping exploiting the natural world. I think you could find ways to stop exploiting the natural world but maintain your happiness. So, no, I don't think it's worth it to do that.
I don't either, but a lot of people seem to think it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, so
and they don't, and they going to the veganism thing, and I'm not a vegan. I've done it before, but I'm not currently. But just like so many people don't have any respect for the experiences of non-human living things on the planet. Like, I don't know, do the trees feel pain? I'm not so sure about that, but I know the animals do.
Yeah, I don't think the trees do at all, but yeah, the animals do.
Yeah. And when you like destroy their home and like they're watching their environment and their home be destroyed when you tear down the forest, like that's a lot of pain and suffering that's happening, right? And people just like don't care.
I think this also comes back to the ignorance thing. I feel like in so many people I know, I see, and I mean even myself to a certain degree, but I do think in this case to a lesser degree, I think people, experience this very anthropocentric worldview of like, you've only ever experienced what it's like to be a human.
Yeah.
So you automatically discount all non-human experience because you can't understand it.
Yeah.
And even to an extent, you discount the experience of other humans because you're not them. You can't understand it.
Well,
you only can understand your own.
Like
experience.
when you're eating your Big Mac, you could easily know, and in your conscious mind have present the fact of where that's coming from.
Yeah.
And like the pain and suffering of the animal, but you're choosing to ignore it.
Right.
And not think about it.
Or, I mean, in some cases, people aren't choosing to ignore it. They're like, yeah, this came from a dead animal. Tasty. I just prefer my own experience over theirs. Which that is especially frustrating to me because it's almost impossible to argue against people who just don't give a shit. Like, it's really like hard to argue against apathy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the fuck you mentality. It's a very heartless way of living, and there's a lot of people, and I see it a lot more with men than women. This heartlessness.
I think it's probably a biological trait, I would guess.
Sure. I mean, what is it, like 99% of violent crime is conducted by men. So, yeah, there's something in the male or the testosterone psyche that is, it just has a fuck you attitude. But
Yeah.
but like I mentioned earlier, humans have the ability to choose to go against our instincts.
Right.
And I'm gonna hold people accountable to that. I'm gonna be like, you don't have, like, yes, I know part of your body is telling you to be that way, part of your mind is telling you to be that way, but you don't have to be that way.
Yeah.
And like, you know what, fuck you if you think that way.
Okay, so I don't want to get into this too much. I don't want to sidetrack us very much, but I am curious if you say these things about not having to give in to your worst human instincts and all that, and that other animal lives have experiences and experience pain. Why are you not a vegan?
So I had been vegan and vegetarian, and at times ovo-vegetarian, which means you just eat eggs, you don't do dairy, for 12 years, since I was like 18. And I currently am on a reduced meat diet. The reason for that is ultimately selfish, but the reasons that I was vegan and vegetarian were environment, right? Because
that was my
less
main
taxing on the environment.
I think
It's my main motivator as well. Ethics, of course, the feelings of the animals, and the third one is for personal health. I think that the vegan or vegetarian diet is super healthy for modern humans that spend most of their life sitting on a couch or in a chair at school or in an office. I started eating meat again because veganism made me feel weak. I was often tired. I'm an athletic person, and I felt weak. I did. I don't know if that might be my own personal metabolism. Different people have different metabolisms. I've decided that there's a balancing point. I eat meat once a week, and I feel a lot better.
Yeah.
My job in construction is extremely taxing physically, and having some meat in my diet has made me feel more capable at work. I feel like a stronger person, and as somebody who cares about other people, I feel that selfishly, but also selflessly, I need to make myself strong enough to take care of people around me, to be able to protect people around me and provide for my community, and to perform the tasks that I provide within our community.
Yeah, I would say that eating meat once a week or being on a reducitarian diet is certainly way better than not doing that.
Yeah, it reduces the pain and suffering of the animals. It drastically reduces the pain and suffering of the animals, drastically reduces environmental impacts. And for me, I felt like this was even healthier than a complete vegan diet.
Yeah.
I think there's like some research that shows that like heart disease and heart attacks and things that are caused by the buildup of cholesterol plaques in your bloodstream, caused by animal fats, can be protected against if you eat enough plant cholesterol and fats.
Yeah.
So it's all about finding that balancing point. And if you're eating a mostly vegetarian diet and eating a lot of plants, that you can protect yourself from the harms that can be caused by a small intake of meat. So
yeah, and I don't want to blame you of any nutrition oversights while not knowing anything about what situation you had, but it is true that many people who switch to vegan diets, it's a drastic change from how they're living their life through childhood and all that. Not everyone is actually getting adequate nutrition on their new diets.
On a vegan diet, you mean?
Yeah, it's simply because now they are creating their own.
Well, it's interesting
out of lack of knowledge or
when
whatnot.
I was in school, and I wasn't as physically active as I was in construction, I actually felt more energy on a vegan diet. I briefly went back to eating meat when got into working out, and I mean, I was eating like giant plates of rice and beans and vegetables, and like I was like eating so much all the time, and then I was like, oh my gosh, this is exhausting. I don't have time to eat 4 giant plates of rice and beans every day. Like, I'm just gonna incorporate small amounts of meat into my diet. And I did that for a time before going back to veganism. Right. And yeah, so it a lot of people report feeling more energetic on a plant-based diet. Yeah, I still am on a plant-based diet.
Yeah, plant-based, yeah. There are certainly better and worse ways to be on a vegan diet, and it's also true, like you said, that people's metabolism is different. Like, you can have surprising results when you switch your diet to something else, whether it's you find that a vegan diet is really bad for you, or you find that it's really good for you.
Yeah, and part of it too is just like, especially in the past, not so much anymore, but there is some toxic mentality within some very like purist mentality in the vegan culture. And I also found being on a reduced meat diet to appeal to more people that I talk to about like veganism, and being like, granted, you could do that while being vegan and say, hey, you don't have to go completely vegan, but sort of just like being an example of a middle ground.
Yeah, it's certainly less of a drastic departure.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful for people to see that there are different options, that you don't have to go all the way in one direction, but that you also literally, like, there's no reason to eat meat with every meal.
Right.
It's just like...
Or with, like, the gigantic proportions of each meal. Like, people eat, like,
oh my gosh,
3/4 of their plate is meat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that is unnecessary.
Yeah. But, men, again, it's like men are like crazy about meat. They're like, I'm such a man, I eat meat, vegetables, masculinity culture for rabbits. Around meat. So it's like, dude, you would be so much stronger if you were on a plant-based diet.
Yeah. Do you ever think about like the future with lab-grown meat? Do you think you would stop eating
Schmeat from Germany?
Sure. Yeah. Say in like 10 years or however long it takes for that to become popularized and widely available, do you think you would like adopt that? Because I've talked to some people and they have problems with that.
I also really like the idea of, I've been trying, so most of the meat that I've eaten this past year was a deer that I shot on my grandpa's land. I've eaten a little bit of fish this year, but that one deer that I shot has lasted me all year. There's just a bit left in the fridge. I'm almost done with it.
This fridge?
Yeah, it's in there.
Did you keep the whole thing in here?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the animal is not used. And it was a smaller deer.
Okay.
I feel a little bit bad because it was young.
Okay.
But the point is that deer lived free.
Right.
It did not live as a slave in a factory farm. And I was just out west in Arizona, and there's some ranch land where we saw a lot of cows, and they're miserable. They're like no, these ranch lands they're happy, they're like free range cows, and they're like living, like they're fenced in, but they're roaming, like they're living. They actually
get space.
Yeah, they're living well. They seem happy. But then on our way back, we were driving in the night, and all of a sudden we're going through like Iowa or something, or Kansas or something, and it's just like we smell something, and then we see like lights and buildings, and then we were looking out the windows, and it's like field of cows, and there's like mist in the air from all of they're just like they're breathing out all this moisture, and it's just like, and it's disgusting.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were talking about.
And that's like most of the meat that's being consumed. So I'm trying to
factory farmed stuff.
Yeah, like I don't. That's why I don't buy meat at restaurants. I've been eating the deer that I shot, and I go to grocery stores where you can pick free range, or you can pick like wild caught. So yeah, I would eat the schmeat, sure, the lab grown meat. Yeah, it sounds like a good option, especially if it's the energy intensity is environmentally sound.
Right.
If it's like super energy intense, like why are we doing it? Like I'd almost rather like eat the free range animal.
Yeah, I think it should be, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
One more thing about that, and then I'll
yeah, it's fine. No, veganism's a good topic. It really plays into good and evil.
I mean, it's certainly, I would say, better to kill an animal that is living. Well, I don't know. In some cases, it seems worse, but overall, I would say better to kill an animal that's living free and happily than to raise one into permanent misery in a factory farm environment. However, if that were you, for instance, wouldn't you react, if you could react, if you weren't dead, wouldn't you react negatively towards the idea that someone is just hunting you? Obviously, you wouldn't want to be raised for slaughter either, but it's certainly not a very happy moment to get shot in the chest while you're wandering your neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm guilty.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel
No, it
bad.
was the first time I ever went hunting was last year, and
Yeah. Oh, ever?
Yeah. Well, I had gone hunting as a kid, but I just sat in the stand with
Yeah.
the older men and was cold and watched them hunt. This is my
Did
first
they
time.
shoot anything though?
Oh yeah.
Okay. This is your first time actually shooting something?
Yeah, this is my first time like killing a deer.
Yeah.
And there was a moment when I thought I might not do it because it looked right at me right before I pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
So there was like some sadness there.
Yeah.
Because of what you're talking about, like, would I want to just get killed? But there is no life without death.
That is something I hear a lot. But then, like what you were saying earlier, though, with the like necessity. Like,
so I caused unnecessary suffering. Yeah, I guess I just have to go back to I want to be strong, and I do put the human family on some level above the rest of the environment. I think humans are incredible. I think we are the pinnacle of evolution on this planet. We are the gem species of this ecosystem that's been developing for 3.5 billion years. Like, we're special. There's probably been many planets that have started to evolve life but never got to the complexity of a human type creature. So life is rare in the universe. People type life,
intelligent life, or
I think is much more rare because the conditions for life to continue have to exist for a long time before consciousness on our level evolves. And I think a lot of planets, I've watched a lot of documentaries on this, a lot of planets die out before they get past like phytoplankton.
Yeah.
Like a lot of planets will develop that far, and then the planetary conditions sort of morph to a point where life is no longer capable and it just ends.
Yeah.
So
yeah, from what I've read, it seems that like single star solar systems are actually the minority, and most of them are like 2-star or even 3 in some cases solar systems. So if you've got a planet that's orbiting 2 stars instead of 1, the orbit's like super fucked up. So you've got these long periods of
darkness or something.
Yeah, like extreme heat or extreme cold.
Yeah.
You're not consistently in that Goldilocks zone, so it's hard for life to develop.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, but it's the killing of the deer is a tough one, but I allowed it for myself. Maybe there was some evil there, but I don't think that changes that I'm overall a good person.
Right, yeah. This is one thing that I think about a lot, and it's like, for instance, if you become vegan because you see an ethical necessity to, it might seem like a logical next step that you are more ethical than other people who aren't vegan.
Right.
But then you've got to think about it in terms of like categories or like what people do with all of their life. So in terms of my relationship with other animals, I might be more ethical than someone else. But there's so many more.
Well, let's say you buy a new iPhone every year.
Right. Yeah.
Like, how do the
or
workers
you own a car and somebody else doesn't.
That build those iPhones?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a better way you could be spending your money that would be much more ethical.
Yeah. Yeah. There's lots of factors that it's not just like if you if it's a comparison between people, if you beat somebody else in one, they might beat you out in like 10 others.
Right.
So it all comes
you have to look
out
at the holistic person.
Yeah. Not just one factor of them.
Yeah. It's tough.
Yeah.
We all make these choices about where we sort of allow ourselves to be selfish or be evil. And this is somewhere where I've allowed myself to be selfish at the expense of an animal. Yeah.
For the record, I don't want to criticize you too much because I think that I would want to convince people to eat as little meat as possible all the time. And I think what you're doing is miles ahead of anything I could have hoped for. And like, if I was actually say if I had convinced you to eat meat less and that's where you ended up, I'd be like, that's a success.
Yeah. I would love if everybody could get to where I am.
So I definitely think overall it is definitely a good thing.
Well, thank you, Wade. I'm glad you at least somewhat approve.
I have one more thing I wanted to mention though, that you talked about earlier a little bit that prompted a question in my mind. How do you think about like moral relativism or moral objectivism? Because a few things you were saying kind of skirted around the edges of that. Do you think there is an objective morality, or do you think?
No, I think everything's situational or relative.
All right, and I think I would agree with that, but I would have some things to explain what I mean. Like relative to what? Relative to the individual, relative to the culture, relative to all of life or humanity.
I think somewhat relative to the individual. Like what we were talking about earlier with like, somebody who like a sociopath or something, like because of the struggle that's going on in their mind to like not understanding empathy or other people, like it must be such a struggle for them to not like you fuck over other people in pursuit of what they want.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like when I judge a person, and I do judge people, I think we should judge each other, we should expect each other to be better, that I really try and consider where they're coming from, where they've come from, and what they've experienced. And I'm not asking that everybody be perfect. I'm just asking that people do the best that they can.
Yeah.
But like, what would moral absolutism be? Like, killing is wrong?
Yeah.
But I've already addressed that. Like, I think maybe killing a bad guy might be good if it creates more long term.
I guess if it was moral, like, yeah, if it's absolutism, then yeah, it's just like these black and white rules. If it's moral objectivism, it could be, you could have like nuance in there, but it would be that for all people, these rules apply, even no matter how, like, if you're killing someone in this specific situation, it's not bad.
But
it's just that like my rules apply to you as well, kind of thing. So like, if it was morally relative to the individual, which is something that I don't think works, I think my position would be that morality is not objective, because it's not like a feature of the universe. If you get rid of life, you get rid of morality, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I would say morality is relative to all of humanity, or maybe even like life itself. It's because I don't think you can have things that are morally relative to the individual. You can't say like what I think is good.
Oh yeah, no, not
is,
like
is
that.
good.
No, not like that. And I mean,
right.
We already talked about it. Is it like it's this collective thing, right? You can't separate right. Like.
So then would it be more to like humanity as a whole, or would you allow for cultural relativism? Because that's something that's very popular these days. For instance.
No, so I think the rules are the same. Like I said, like, but like my expectation of people's ability to get there. Yeah. I think I want to operate in a realistic sense of like, this is like somebody's at this point.
Right.
Culturally. And like, sure, I would want every culture, but like to like pursue similar programs and policies that like create what we were talking about before, like less needless suffering, and create more like security through which people can experience joy and happiness. Like that's what I think every culture should strive to, but different societies are at different points.
Yeah.
So like my expectation of them reaching the ideal, they can't jump from, medieval, like Saudi Arabia has some very medieval policies, and I don't expect them to jump. I expect them to take the next step.
Right. But you still would say that.
But my definition.
Saudi Arabia's like treatment of women is overall evil.
It's evil, yeah, it is. It's an unfortunate truth.
Right. And I think that's where the this like popularity of cultural relativism comes from, is people's uncomfort with casting judgment on cultures that aren't their own. But I feel like,
well, there's like some of these like famous talking heads that'll like shit on Islam all the time,
right?
And like Ben Shapiro and like Sam Harris come to mind, and they're like right, and then the left gets really mad because they're like being politically incorrect and categorizing like an entire group of people. But it's like, if you accept that they're generalizing about many of the people and societies that are practicing this religion, and that there's a lot of bad going on, like, I agree with those generalizations, but in some ways I don't think I don't know, is it fair to like expect them to be at the same point that we are? Especially when I think some of the world powers are making it easier rather than harder for those societies to stay in those type of medieval mentalities. I think the trick is to try and make it easier for people to do the right thing and harder for people to do the wrong thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in a certain way you kind of do have to judge other cultures, or else if you just say, yeah, like Saudi Arabia, whatever you want to do, that's fine, then like what is their incentive to actually improve their treatment of women?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't expect that tomorrow they're going to have equal rights. You got to realize that it takes people time. But as far as the thing
I just thought of another tough one on this topic.
Oh, yeah.
And it has to do with African American culture. And so this is like touchy, and I don't want people to get upset with me, but I have heard a lot of people say being rough with the kids and disciplinarian in a physical way is like, that's just African American culture.
Yeah, there's that concept of hitting him with the spoon. The Community episode with Donald Glover.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The grandma.
Yeah, the grandma.
Oh yeah, that's such a great show.
She's got to hit Britta with a spoon. She's got to bend over. Yeah.
So, I don't agree. It's like, I think if we have found, and I think the evidence is pretty conclusive, in psychological research, that
hitting
being
kids is bad.
That being heavy-handed with positive reinforcement, right, and being very sort of slight with the punishments.
Yeah.
That's like the best way to raise people. I mean, I think to continue, just being like, well, that's our culture.
Yeah. To continue giving
and
other
I'm a white
pass.
person, so like I don't even think like I don't have anything to say anything more about it. But I just sort of to say, yeah, I think it's sort of universal that when we find how cause and effect works and we know which things cause positive outcomes, I think we need to find ways for everybody to shift in that direction. I don't think it's culturally relevant or relative. But is it don't yuck my yum? I don't know.
I think I'm comfortable saying that no matter who you are or what culture you're in, don't hate your kids. And if you find problems with my culture, then criticize away. And there are plenty.
Oh, yeah. I spend a lot of time criticizing Europeans.
Yeah. And I think there is one thing.
We're kind of our ancestors, or my ancestors, white people, are kind of like, have been in some ways the masters of the fuck you mentality.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and a lot of like my coworkers are very much that way. It's sort of like if you bring up things from the past or how Europeans have screwed over other like groups in this country historically, they're kind of just like, too bad is their mentality. And I'm like, that's totally messed up. Like, it's just not okay to think that way in my mind.
Yeah. But the thing you said before about hating on Islam or whatever, I think there's an important point to be made that you can criticize Islam and you're not criticizing Middle Eastern people. It's not like you're not criticizing a race of people. You're criticizing ideas,
right, that
people have.
It's kind of like anytime I judge anybody and like attack a part of their personality, they get really like offended. But I'm like, that's not the total. I'm just picking one part of you, and you're allowed to make that not a part of you anymore.
Right.
Like I don't hate you. I just hate certain choices that you're making.
Yeah.
And that's not all of who you are, and that's not all you're ever going to be. Like, I'm hoping that you're going to be a better person.
Yeah. And like, I critique Islam all the time, but I also critique every other religion that exists.
Oh, yeah.
And I think like what you're saying about Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris, Ben Shapiro, I think, doesn't deserve very much credit because in his case, he's an Orthodox Jew hating on Islam. So there's like a hypocrisy there. Like, he's like, my religion is the good one. Yours sucks. Sam Harris is an atheist and he's critiquing all religions. So I think
it's better.
Yeah. I think it makes more sense in that regard. He's not playing favorites.
I kind of despise
Ben Shapiro.
Yeah. Sam Harris I have problems with, but if I had to choose between listening to one or the other, I would choose Harris.
Yeah.
But I think there's better people to listen to than Sam Harris.
Who do you like to listen to?
I like to listen to my friends. I like to I'm kind of not into like celebrities.
Right.
I'm very into, cuz like I don't know them.
Yeah.
Am I just supposed to like believe this is who they are? Like,
Yeah, it could be like a persona they're adopting.
I like, man, I'm into real life, man. Like
That's good.
I'm into like the people who are here in my community. I like knocking on my neighbors' doors and asking them what they think about universal health care or universal basic income, or what they think about unemployment income and stuff. Like, that's who I like talking to and listening to, are the people who are right here in my community.
Yeah.
But celebrities, I guess, I mean, I've gotten into Joe Rogan.
I'm not a big fan of Joe Rogan.
You're not alone.
You listen to his podcast?
A little. I'm not a diehard, but
yeah, I think the benefit of his podcast is that he has people on that are more interesting than him.
Definitely.
When I listen to a Joe Rogan episode, it is not for Joe Rogan. It is
definitely
for his guests.
I think he would agree with you on that.
Oh yeah, that's good. But I don't know, like, I can't listen to too much of him, and I wonder if people that have listened to many episodes of this now feel the same way about me. But I can't listen to too much of him because I realize he keeps on like bringing up the same things over and over. He's always... That's
all of us, though. We have our pet ideas that we...
Yeah, I guess it's easier to take people in smaller doses sometimes then.
Yeah, which is why I mean, he's got like 2,000 episodes. I've listened to like 10 maybe, you know, they're long.
Yeah, they're like 3-4 hours.
Yeah, I like him. Who else? I like one of the guys that he has had on his show a lot, Duncan Trussell.
Oh yeah,
he made that
talking about like psychedelics all the time.
Yeah, he's also like really into Buddhism.
Oh yeah.
And when I studied Eastern philosophy in college, I really I like Buddhism as a philosophy. I have looked at how it's practiced in countries where it's a dominant religion, and I do not like how it's practiced as a religion. Yeah. But some of the core philosophies I think are really useful, and I use them in my life and in my own personal philosophy a lot.
Like, what aspects of it do you think are beneficial to you?
They have this thing called dependent arising. It's the idea that all things dependently arise from other things. Okay. And this is the sort of basis for the idea of no self. Because if you cannot separate, or if a cause necessarily creates an effect, right, can you really separate the effect from the cause, or are they part of a process? And through being a process, they are the same thing. They are a process, not a thing. So therefore, nothing is really separate from anything else.
Right, it's all connected.
They also call this like interpenetration.
That sounds dirty.
It does, doesn't it? It's like all things are contained within other things. Like when two things come in contact, they are becoming part of each other through the interaction of the things. So all things are interpenetrating other things. Like in our conversation here, like my presence is becoming a part of your experience, and your presence is becoming a part of my experience. And so we're not separate. We're here together creating this experience. And then you kind of like bring that out over time, like all things are interpenetrating all things, and that we're all a part of one process that's happening.
Yeah, that kind of makes me imagine like all of the universe is just like a wavelength. You know, everything is all just a process together. You just keep zooming out and it's all just a bunch of waves.
Yeah, but it has that idea has interesting consequences on like ideas about morality, because it really does create that idea that like if I want to be good to myself, I have to be good to the world around me, because if I'm good to the world around me, I'm a part of that. I'm being good to myself by being good to you. Yeah, because like when I see you happy, it makes me happy, and when you're doing well, you can return the favor to me or to somebody else. And then that like chain of like good effect like continues. I believe all things are pattern forming. Like everything forms patterns. So if you can create good patterns, they continue. You create bad patterns.
Yeah, like your good effects ripple outward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean in a way that's just like evidently true. Like if you do a small favor for someone and make them happier that day, they're more likely to in turn do another small favor for someone else, and it just kind of continues onward.
I feel like there was a commercial about that. Like,
Was there?
yeah, I'm not big into. I actually hate advertisements, but
I hate advertisements.
there was a YouTube commercial that was like 30 seconds long, where like one person like did some small thing for somebody else, and then it just like
chain
a chain
butterfly
reaction,
effect.
yeah, of goodness. And then who even knows what the product was? But even if I could remember what the product was, I wouldn't mention it because I don't want people to buy things.
Yeah. That's unnecessary as well.
Well, I don't want people to buy things that were made in factories. If your friend like knit a scarf, or like somebody in your community knit a scarf, yeah, go ahead and buy that. That sounds cool. Yeah. Which actually goes to my idea of heaven and hell.
Oh, what's that?
Well, so I think like Christianity and a lot of the major religions, and Buddhism has like aspects of it as well. It's like this idea of like creating punishments and rewards in the afterlife to try and like reinforce good behavior, right? But for me, like I don't believe there
is an afterlife.
Not for me.
Right.
Like when I die, there's no...
Do you think there's an afterlife for other people?
I think that when I die, there are things that continue living on this planet after me. And that is the afterlife.
After your life, yeah.
After my life. There is... And I think that's enough. So like we, through our good actions, we can create good afterlife because we have these lasting impacts on reality that last beyond us.
So your heaven is for other people.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Normally the way I conceptualize heaven and hell is in one of two ways. Either it's just the state that you create for yourself right now and like throughout your life. Like by doing good things, you make yourself happy and you make your own life worthwhile. And by doing bad things, you fill yourself with psychological torment, which is your hell. So it's like a metaphor. Or it's in the final moments of your existence, your brain goes crazy and you
experience some kind of...
create a fictional reality for yourself to live in, and it might feel like an infinite amount of time from your perspective.
Oh, there's that final moment.
Right. Where your brain...
And if you're traumatized by all the bad things that you did...
Right.
Then, like, it's going to be a terrible infinite moment of death.
There's this idea I've been getting into a lot lately with, like, fractals and how, like, in a way, everything is infinite. For instance, like, mathematically... You can find infinity within the numbers 0 to 1, or 1 to 2, or 2 to 3. And then with space, if you, what's his name, Mandelbrot, that paper, like, how long is the coastline of Great Britain or something? They took the coastline of Great Britain, and they measured it with, like, 1 foot, or, like, rulers or whatever, and they came up with a certain number.
Right.
And then they measure it with a smaller measuring unit.
You get a bigger number.
And you keep doing it over and over.
The smallest measurement, you'd find all these different little changes in direction.
Yeah.
Oh.
It approaches, it's like asymptotic. It approaches infinity. So it's like you can just keep looking smaller, looking closer and closer.
And there's more.
And there's always more. So you can have, I mean, obviously this is theoretical, but you might be able to have this infinite moment at the end of your life. That from your perspective, if you're watching me die, it's a split second. From my perspective, in my brain workings, it's infinite. Or, close enough to infinite as to feel infinite.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea.
But I like yours as well, creating a heaven that isn't for you.
Yeah.
But just the world living after you're gone.
Yeah, I mean, we live, all of us will live on in the fact that our actions have a lasting impact on the future.
Yeah.
It can't, and everything matters. Every single decision has some, of course it's on a scale, it's on a spectrum, but like everything has some importance. Like some moments might be so small on the importance scale that they don't really matter, but like everything matters to some degree. Like every single choice you make matters in the fact that it changes the future.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful. I mean, it's a burden too. Like it becomes burdensome to like think constantly about how your actions are affecting the world around you. But if you really start to live that way, it becomes very rewarding.
Yeah, it is a burden, but I think there's lots of different, people and authors who talk about how burdens or responsibilities are the thing that make your life worthwhile.
Oh yeah, having some type of purpose. Like working towards
myth
something.
Of Sisyphus.
I don't know it.
by Albert Camus, who wrote The Stranger. With the, there's the Greek Titan, is he? Sisyphus or whatever. He is doomed by Zeus to having to perpetually roll a boulder up a hill.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah. And then in that book, Albert Camus writes that, like, we must imagine Sisyphus is happy, that his endless toil is what gives him meaning.
Mm. Yeah, so oftentimes we think about like a goal, right? Like we're going to reach completion.
Right.
But the way of the world is not like that. It's like, it is like an endless struggle.
Yeah.
And even if we were to create some type of ideal world where like happiness is maximized and unnecessary suffering is minimized, like there's like chaos within nature that creates like bad things. There's going to be accidents that hurt people, and they're going to feel, and it could scar them permanently to the point where now they want to hurt the world because they've been hurt. Right. And so there's always going to be a fight to sort of balance the scales or bring things back into a positive place.
You can still spontaneously create evil.
Yeah.
Through that kind of thing. So yeah, it's an endless struggle against it.
Yeah, but it's what gives life meaning, right?
Yeah, it's like a perennial process. And okay, so before you were saying that you were deterministic in your view of the world, and I think I was that way up until a few years ago. Because I think there's good reason to believe that there is genuine randomness that exists, and that you couldn't, even if you had the supercomputer the size of Jupiter, you could not collect, or as big as you want, you couldn't collect all the data to predict the next moment because there's randomness involved. There's elementary particles that pop into existence or don't decide what they are until you observe them.
Yeah, I guess maybe I misrepresented myself.
Oh, okay.
I do tend to think that in a determinist way, but with knowing that none of the variables could ever be calculated, it's like
it's ultimately not deterministic.
It's like theoretically you could determine it,
right.
But like in practice, it's not.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't even think theoretically you could. It's deterministic. I think it's like stochastic. There's random.
Stochastic?
Stochastic, yeah.
Okay.
It's it's confined randomness.
Yes.
So like there's a points where you can't just randomly end up. So it's like a determinist with margins, I guess.
Margins it's like not everything is possible.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of possibilities within the limits of reality.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. An infinite number of possibilities within a limited reality.
Exactly. Okay, this might or might not have anything to do with but one thing you said earlier that I was starting to say something on. I was talking about how people, I think, in a lot of cases, have an inability or refusal even to understand experiences that are non-human or even other human because we're trapped within our own perspective.
Yeah.
In the same way, I think people struggle to understand timescales or physical scales that are like so much bigger than themselves, where they kind of reject things. We were talking about the environmentalism and whether it's good to just keep exploiting the environment for our own happiness.
Yeah.
And a lot of people seem to say it is good. And I think for those people, what's often is the case is they can't really wrap their brains around the scope of like global warming and how 7 billion people exist and they all make choices and all those choices accumulate on the whole planet.
Yeah.
And in the same way, I find that this is probably also the reason why, people can't believe in evolution because it's just on such gigantic timescales, like millions of years that take place for a species to change.
Yeah.
And they just can't wrap their brains around millions of years, so it's preposterous to them. So I think it comes, once again, like I was saying before, it comes down, for me anyway, I think, possibly to ignorance. It's just not being able to understand these things, or not wanting to anyway, whether it's willful ignorance or just genuine ignorance.
So I think that's very true, I think. And I think of myself as a highly conscious person, and I think consciousness is like bringing your mind's attention to something, right? Becoming aware of something. And it's on a spectrum, like all things. Like people are conscious, but we don't we can't be conscious of everything all the time. Our mind
Yeah.
has limits. We can only direct our consciousness on so much. And so many people are toiling away just at survival that they don't have the time to become consciously aware of a lot of things. They don't have the privilege to spend their mental energy, which is their physical, like your mind is part of your body. Like it takes energy to power the consciousness in your brain and to direct it to all of these problems. So I think people need more free time to be able to grapple and understand the world. But, you know, when you've got kids and a job and bills to pay, it's not easy to become so aware of what's going on.
Right. So like their bandwidth is taken up by all of their other things, like their kids,
Yeah.
all the necessities of life that they don't have the time to focus on.
Yeah.
That.
Definitely. And when both parents are working too, it becomes even more difficult, because then who's got the free time to teach the kids how to be conscious and aware?
Although I think this is slightly kind of related to what you were just saying. I think people in many cases, even if they're struggling with most of their time, I think they still do have the free time. For instance, people who can't wrap their brain around such huge scales and doubt evolution are often religious, and they devote their free time to church and what I would think of as a temple of ignorance.
Yeah, I have a lot of problems with the church, with all the churches. I think that religion is a means to keep people powerless by not, it's a temple of ignorance, like you said, by keeping them from understanding reality. Yeah, I think that the church is a huge problem. You're teaching adults to believe in fairy tales, which once you thoroughly program that into them, it becomes very difficult for them to start exploring reality,
right?
Because it goes against these stories that have been ingrained into their brains as true, these false, and I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone, but I think the stories are ridiculous. Like a big white man in the sky, sorry man, it's not real. It's just not real.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think a lot of people actually believe in at least more sophisticated people who believe in God don't believe it in terms of an actual like man or
I think if you pressure them, they will agree that it isn't.
Yeah.
But I think in practice, oftentimes that's what they're imagining.
Yeah. But yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is that I think people do have the free time to put their attention onto other things. They just choose not to.
Yeah.
They choose to devote their attention.
This is an example of our culture making it easy to do the wrong thing and difficult to do the right thing. Or like you could look at how much time people spend watching TV and movies, right? And the commercials that they watch while watching the TV and movies. It's like there is a lot of time to become educated. They could be watching documentaries. They could be watching PBS programs. They could be watching the news. They could be reading history on Wikipedia. But like those things aren't encouraged. Those things are not easy to obtain.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like when you check out at the store, you know, there's all the candy and crap right there while you're waiting in line.
Yeah.
Our culture makes it so easy to make the wrong choice and so difficult to make the right choice. And we need to like design a culture and a society that makes it, I don't want to take choice away from people, but we got to design this in a way that's just like directs people in the right direction.
Yeah. We were talking about this a little bit with freedom and whether it's good or not, but choice, it's not inherently a good thing, and there's a point where it's a bad thing. I was reading this book called The Paradox of Choice, and using a supermarket as an example, if you have an aisle that's filled up with 46 different types of peanut butter, that's going to cause stress and, like, in some cases, like, debilitating inability to actually make a decision, versus if you had 3 choices of peanut butter.
And,
so,
and
like,
of
limiting
those 46,
choices.
only one of them doesn't have sugar added.
Yeah. So
the rest of them are peanut butter flavored frosting.
Right. So there's a way that you can limit people's choices and make them happier.
Yeah. So I reread a book called Walden 2 recently, which is by the behaviorist B.F. Skinner.
Right.
And it's a book about this intentional community or commune that's started by this guy, and he basically, it's all based on Skinner's behaviorist psychology. So the community is designed in a way that it's almost like impossible for people to make bad choices. And so then the people who have been invited, these two professors who have been invited to like visit the community, and they're being shown around by the creator of the community, and he's like trying to defend what he's done, and they're sort of like attacking and critiquing, and they're like, well, you're basically like a secret dictator. Like these people, like you're controlling everything about these people's lives. And he's like, maybe I am, but it doesn't matter because look how good they're living. And they think they're choosing. And as long as they think they're choosing.
Yeah, right.
Something I like to think about better is with democracy. Like, instinctually, we make bad choices. But if in a moment of, or maybe in several moments of, like, stepping out of our day-to-day, like, instinctual behavior, and if we could just be, like, conscious in one moment when we're deciding who to vote for or what policy to vote for, if we could just be conscious and like try and be our own parent in that moment and decide, you know what, I know that like I really like sugary soda, but it might be like better to design a world where it's harder for me to make that choice because it's better for me and my community.
Yeah.
Like in this moment, like I can elect to decide to design our world in a way so that the rest of my time I can act instinctually, and it's easy to not drink that sugary soda. And I think that's like a beauty of democracy, is that people do, if they take the time, know what's better for them in the long run, and that they don't have to constantly keep making that choice, that they can just at one time choose, yes, this is the type of laws that we should create, so they don't have to constantly
redecide every time.
Because it's so hard to do that every moment of every day.
Yeah.
Or like with our phone, you know, just like all the types of things that we're addicted to, like looking at our phones all the time. It's like, oh gosh, if we could just design this better so that I don't have to fight against my instincts all the time.
Yeah.
It would be better, right?
Yeah, setting your life up in such a way that it's easy.
Like choosing
to continue doing these good habits.
To limit your own freedom.
Yeah.
But it's a choice because it's democracy, right? So
yeah. Also with this choice thing, having choice overload, there's plenty of studies that show, like for instance, in one, you give people a variety of jelly beans to choose from, and they choose one, eat it, and then you give them a short questionnaire on how they feel about their choice afterwards.
Yeah.
If you give them, 2 to 5 jelly beans, then they're pretty happy with it, no matter what they chose. 2 to 5 jelly beans to choose from. I mean, they only choose one. But if you give them like 20, then they always regret their choice because
maybe that one was better. Or I should have chose.
Right.
Huh.
Because, since there's 20, they spend more time trying to think. They're like, okay, is that one, I really like that flavor. And then once they finally choose, they've got so many options in their head that, they could have chosen.
Yeah, I see that. That makes sense.
Well, I think we're getting near the end here.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I'd like to ask you, though, do you have you just mentioned a book.
I did.
Do you have like a book recommendation for the audience?
3 books.
Okay.
One I read when I was 16. It's the autobiography of Malcolm X. Another one I read when I was, I want to say 23 or something, which was the autobiography of Martin Luther King. He didn't actually write it, but it's a compilation of his works.
Oh, okay.
But it, in an autobiographical, is altered to be an autobiography.
Okay.
The man who did it is like, the family hired him to look over all of MLK's writings, and then eventually asked him to compile this book. It's very good. And the third one is, which I read 2 years ago when I was 28, was Black Against Empire, which is the most comprehensive history of the Black Panthers ever written. Those 3 books together will give you like a very good sense of the race problem in America from Black eyes, from Black minds. And yeah, you should read them because this country has like a very bad problem that has to be fixed.
Yeah.
Like I don't until we fix the injustices of our past, I don't think the United States has any moral ground to really stand on. So yeah, I would recommend those.
Nice. All right. Any parting words?
It's possible to make a better world.
Yeah.
You know, and our decisions matter, and become aware. Don't be ignorant, and just pay attention and try and be a good person. It's very rewarding.